So, welcome, friends, for today's session. Today, I will share my experience about cloud monitoring. More importantly, what you need to know before doing the monitoring setup. It's very important that we do it properly. Otherwise, our IT security and other teams will be on our tail to see that. So, in today's agenda, we will just have discuss the challenges, available monitoring options. Then we will have a demo. We will discuss what are the conclusion. And in the end, we will have the question answers in the meet the speaker. In demo, if we want to discuss things in depth, that will be in meet the speaker forum. So by looking at this picture, what comes in my mind? This is my personal experience that few months back, I got a call from my department head. Hey Rahul, are we need monitoring the cloud? I looked at the time. It was mid in the night. Monitoring the cloud in the middle of night. Do we really need to discuss it now? I asked him. He said yes. But why? He said we are missing some alerts and what is happening that needs to be taken care of. I said okay. But is it so serious that we need to look into this right now? He explained that some of the developers have moved their services into Azure for the latest feature and application is unresponsive. So we are having a P1 running right now. I believe most of us would have been in similar situations. Initially, at that time, I was also blank that alerts is somewhat and why did they not inform us about it? So I told him, okay, let me come to office. I will prepare some things and then we can talk about it. He said, okay. So next day when I went to my office, I have prepared these points, few things, keeping these things or these challenge into my mind about Azure. First point I would discuss is security. On-prem, the things are secure in our data center. But if we are communicating with Azure, then there is a very risk of hackers spoofing our data or hacking our data. Being a financial institution, we need approval from IT security and legal for use of few things in there. So we will be doing this security measure in the Azure side. We will be using REST API. We will be using SPN, and then we will be using endpoint to scope it up. And then we will use certificate for the application identity to authenticate and generate a bearer token in the solution. And if I talk about scoping, it is very much similar. How do we scope targets in SCOM workflows like Windows Server class or a DB server class or an application server class that we define so that those workflow will run on those particular points. Third point is low level privileges that we should give only that much rights that is required to monitor that application. Something similar to run as profile and run as account in SCOM. So we will do all these things while creating a cloud monitoring application. So what are the available options? There are many options available from the vendors, that is Azure Management Pack, Azure SQL Management Pack, and Nice Active 365 MP. And then if some of the services are not available or any feature or anything which is not available on cloud, that is in AWS, ServiceNow, then we have to do it yourself type of management pack. I have developed A10 load balancer management pack to check its status, then ServiceNow workflows, where it checks whether the business identities are in line with the applications or not, the changes are opened or closed, is there any problem with those things, then Azure AD Connect as well. So this is what we are going to discuss in our session today. Azure AD Connect help with SCOM. Basic question comes into my mind. If something is being monitored or if we can monitor something in cloud itself, why do we need SCOM, or why do we want to integrate something with SCOM? Yes, there is a very much possibility that you can monitor things with the help of Azure Monitor, or in this case Azure AD Health Connect, which is a feature comes with the enterprise license of Azure AD Connect. You will not find this option with Azure AD Connect normal license. You have to buy a premium license for that. So, but in that case, there is lots of data, but our monitoring team or the application team or the developers are very much interested in having data which is well formatted and coming into a single pane of glass, so that they don't need to look into different dashboards in there. So with this solution, we have used management server resource pool, so that we have the residency that if one server goes down, then monitoring is not lost. Then we will use Azure Management API to authenticate with Azure AD Health Connect and fetch the data from there. The authentication part will be done via SPN using certificate in there. We will look how things will pan out a little bit later. So if I talk about Azure AD Connect, it is designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid identity goals in there, that you don't need to keep the data or create users in cloud separately. You create your users on-prem and then it will be synced up with Azure AD in there. The best example to implement this Azure AD Connect is Office 365. If you want to implement, then you need to install Azure AD Connect into your Azure and map your Azure AD subscription with on-prem AD, so that the users which are onboarded on-prem can access Office 365 data and applications in there. If I talk about APIs in there, like Azure Management API, there are many APIs which are commonly used with Microsoft in there. This is a snapshot from Azure Portal, which I will just quickly show you from where we can find this out. There is Graph API, there are AD API, and there are Azure Service Management APIs. If you have developed an API of your own, or your organization has developed an API, in that case, you can also use that to connect with these services in there. I have created one application identity for the demo purpose, which will give you all this data in there. If I talk about APIs, then you will find all the details in here while adding a permission in here. All these are Microsoft commonly used APIs. These are the other APIs for Exchange, SharePoint, and everything. If you want more details about these APIs, then you can just go to that and then click on Docs. You will find the complete documentation section over here. How to get this, what are the endpoints it is used for, what are the actions, what are the observations, operations, everything you can find out. How can you use it with these details? Then coming to the API section, there are two type of permissions. One is a delegate permission and second one is application permissions. Delegate permission, if I speak, that you typically use delegated permissions when you want to call the web API as the logged on user. Say for example, that the web API needs to filter the data it returns based on who the user is, or execute some action as the logged in user, or even just to log which user was initiating the call. While application permissions are used when the application calls the API itself. For example, to get the weather forecast for a certain zip code, it does not matter which user is logged on. The client can even call the API when there is no user present. some background service calling the API to update some status. This is how you will define this. So if I click on delegate permission, you will find all these permissions along with the operations and actions with details in there. If you want more data, you can click on this. Then you will see the details what this permission can do that. So it is very important that you assign least privileges, that is the read permissions for this in there. Going back to the slide part, we are going to use Azure Management Service API for this. But if I talk about this Azure AD Connect, there is no information, or I couldn't find any API which supports this Azure AD Connect Health in there. How did I verified it? I verified it using this URL, which gives you all the details about which are available and which are not. Over here, you can see these are the REST API browser. I will say about this. All the available Microsoft APIs are listed over here. For example, AKS, all the agent pools, managed cluster, all their operation actions are listed over here. And you can easily get the REST point API action with the URI parameters, responses, and you can try it out as well. For the demo part, I just want to do this. I will be selecting app service plans list. I'm using app service as in REST point API and then listing some data in there. With this, I will just log in using my username password of my Azure subscription. Then I will just run this. You will get the response back in here with the headers. The response code is there, and then the data in JSON format as well in here. So this is how you can just try and see whether your service or the URLs are working or not with the APIs and this, because API was very alien to me. Finding this data was very much a lifesaver for me to test these things out. Otherwise, you have to use tools like Postman or any other tools, Visual Studio Code as well in there. As I coming back to this, I did not find anything. So I contacted Microsoft about that, and they shared an API in private review. That was like about 10 months back. There I found out that the data which is getting fetched is of no use for the infrastructure team. They said they see more things which create false positive alerts than a positive alerts. So we need to have some alerts which give benefit to the users. So in that case, I used the portal to decode the code. How can we do that? It is very simple to do such things in there. So in that case, we need to open portal.azure and then log in there. And after logging, we need to go to a specific URL which we want the REST point API things or REST point API settings. For me, I'm interested in Azure AD Connect Health. So I will go with this. But here is the catch. How do I get this data with the REST point API? For that, I will use developer tools inside the Chrome browser. You can use Fiddler as well. You can use other network tools as well to find this data out. So as soon as I connect on this health, you see, I can see all these URLs which are getting called in here with the responses in here. Some of them will not give you any data. It will say fail to load, but you have to just go through all these URLs so that you get data what you are looking at. Over here, you can see what is my initial domain in there, Azure AD, and then all these data in the JSON format, which I will use in the PowerShell to fetch the data with. So if I go and clean this up, again, I start this activity and I go in the Azure portal. for the Azure Active Directory, you can see one alert is there. See, one active alert is there. There is no resolved alert. So this alert information is getting listed in there. So if I want more granular data, I will go further in there, and then I will see this data coming in, and I will check these URLs. What are the values which are coming in and out? All these things in there. So if I click on further, then you will see health service data is not up to this, and with all the data display name, and then we will replicate this data back into SCOM using this APIs in there. So if I want to see what is the URL for this API, this is the URL, request URL, management.azure.com providers, and then it goes into Microsoft AD hybrid health services and go on in there. And this is the response which it generated back in there. So this data which I showed you, this data needs to be provided by the application team, because you don't know what is the exact health state or the error state of that application. So in that case, I would suggest shared ownership between subject matter experts or the developers and the SCOM team. What developers need to do is application team implements a health check endpoint for their application as a REST API solution. If there is an in-house application, then they will do that. And once we get that data, then we need to integrate health check with SCOM using advanced PowerShell module available using Visual Studio or authoring extension or any tools, third-party tools, or simply adding in the XML or using like PowerShell management pack from the community from Squared Up in there. Now coming to the most exciting part, demo. So in the demo, I will share 3 scripts basically. That is for the certificate path in there. That first we need to generate a certificate, and that certificate will be used on a server with a specific account. This comes with the security part in there, because if this certificate is not present and from that account it should be generated, and then the location where it needs to be imported, and how much long you want that to be generated, and then you just give these properties, and then certificate, generate that, and then export it out, and then install on a particular server using this certificate. What you need to do in Azure portal is you need to go back in there in Azure Active Directory and in the app registrations, and with the app identity, that is the service principal name. In here, you will define the API permissions, and over here, certificates and secrets. You need to upload this certificate in there, which you will generate on that path. That is the certificate. Once you upload that certificate, you will get a thumbprint over there listed. That thumbprint you will use for the authentication purpose in there. So once we had that data and uploaded it, we are good to proceed further into authentication using certificate sample script. That is the second part in there. Over here, what are the prerequisites in there and what this script is doing? This script is an example of how to connect to Azure REST API endpoint by acquiring an access token using a certificate. Prerequisite, first we need to generate the certificate using the script on a server, or you can use a manually method to generate the certificate. with specific service account under which SCOM workflow will run. It is very important that we use the service account or a account through which we are going to configure the account in there. Then we need a tenant name and the application ID. What is an application ID? Application ID is the application identity. This information, application identity, is there. I have gone back to Rahul demo, and in the topmost part, application client ID is available. So you need that information. Once you generate the certificate to see whether that certificate is available with that thumbprint, you can use that thumbprint in there. Take the thumbprint details. This is the thumbprint ID. You can publish in there. Then scoping part, to scope to a particular REST API endpoint in there, so that the bearer token which gets generated should not go and perform other activities on other services hosted in Azure or other providers in there. So I have given this to the Microsoft Hybrid Health Service so that it can go down inside that. Then you need to add the certificates in there. Basically, this is the Java Web Token timestamp for expiration and other things you are doing in there. And then you are adding that certificate with Java Web Token for the authorization. Over here, we are generating the authorization purpose. Then we are using the auth 2.0 token endpoint for this app identity in there. And then we are using a particular URL to fetch the data. This is the same URL which I showed you earlier in while this thing, that settings in there. Once we get this data in there, it means that we are able to access data in Azure using PowerShell modules in there. Also, it is very important to, if I talk about Azure AD Health Connect only, that we provide some permissions in there. Role-based access control, because it requires specific permissions. So you need to add the users to give access to Azure Active Directory Connect Health in there. If you have given access to Azure Active Directory Connect, that doesn't mean that users will be able to browse this Azure Active Directory Connect Health. So you need to assign the ownerships. Contributor right is the must with this thing, or you can try with some other roles as well in there. So then we will, once the data is generated with this, then we will convert this into SCOM based thing. So that we will call the SCOM mom API to create a property bag, add the details in there, and then in the end, based on our logic, whatever our infra team says that we should have an error and healthy status, that we will do. And in the end, we will return the bag, and then we will just, in the end, we just log some events and finish. Once this data is returned back, then based on that, we can create a rule monitor or any other workflow which we want to create in there. So in after this demo, I will, if you have more details or more questions, then please meet me in the Meet the Speakers forum. Yeah, these scripts will be available to download over there as well. So after this, we come to a conclusion that alerts from different sources can come into single pane of glass, that is SCOM. The major benefit would be that our monitoring team do not have to switch between different browsers or different dashboards in there. And it is not just for Azure, it is for AWS or any portal like ServiceNow or load balancer if it is working with the REST API. If I talk about security, then security means Azure portal and runners profile. I showed you that we have this particular settings inside application registrations with the certificates as well as permissions, API permissions assigned to it, which means that we do not go beyond that. Along with it, we add certain checks in there that the expiration of bearer token as well as scoping of a REST point API, these things take consideration of the security aspect. Then the scoping part, scoping it on a relevant endpoint and only relevant alerts, something like this, which will be generated in there. So this is one of the alerts which got generated with the data validation error one in there. So if I go in portal, right now there is no alerts because I have shut down the machine where I have installed Azure AD Connect. So that alert got auto resolved, but that this alert is from data validation error. If you see data validation error over here, failure, this was the data and attributes where this alert was generated. So if you want to go any further, any alerts and like do a synchronization or capture only specific alerts, you can do it very easily using a PowerShell based alerting. Hope to see you guys in Meet the Speaker. That is all from my side. And you can contact me on my LinkedIn. And if you have any doubts, any questions, you can email me on Rahul7008 at gmail.com.